Welcome, forest dwellers, to the Forest of Dean. It's very exciting. They've shoehorned me out of the office, out of the safety of a set, and into the wilds. So if you see a bear or a wolf behind me and the screen sort of goes a bit blurry, don't worry, I'm sure it's all okay. Big thing is these asks are from you and we're answering them, and it's great, and it's really awesome that we've got this platform where you can subscribe, you can kind of ask us these questions and we'll be able to get you the answers. So keep using the hashtag Ask GMBN Tech on any of the comments on the off-road side and we'll try and get you an answer pretty quick. So let's dive in. First question here. It's a really interesting one and of the times. So Chris has got a T-type drivetrain and he wants lower gears for steeper climbs. Well, good work. And your suggestion is really valid. You want to see if you can switch from a 32 tooth on the front chainring down to a 30. And he's just wondering, can he swap it? Okay, so takeaway point is a maybe. There's a couple of different factors. First thing is that SRAM with their new T-type drivetrain have got a really handy app which you can use, well, to program what the buttons do, but also to use as a chain length calculator. It's really handy. There's a link here or there, and yeah, you can put in your frame, your model, and all the details, even sizing if the chainstays are size specific, and it will tell you pretty much exactly what chain length you'll need. So that's the first thing to do. Obviously, in that app, you can put in your chainring size. If the calculator isn't listed, you'll need to have your chainstay length, so you'll have to get kind of a tape measure and get that measurement really detailed. I guess the other final factor is that you need to just be mindful about how and where your chainstay sits. I mean, I would say if you're going down from a 32 to a 30, you should have enough clearance, but it might be one of those things that you'll need to check the manufacturer's spec for your bike as well. So yeah, the SRAM app is really good and should be the first point of call. Super question here from Neil. Love a question. Good to get them in. This one is, does a 10mm reduction in stem length make a huge difference? I mean, well, yes and no. So some riders are much more sensitive to change. So will you notice 10mm of difference on your stem? Well, it depends on you. I mean, personally, I can feel it. If I'm hopping on a brand new bike, there is no way I will notice, purely because there's so many other parameters on the bike that are new. Different tyres, different pedals, whether you're riding clips or flats. I guess the other thing about bar position is also bar roll. So if you're rolling your bars really forward and you're changing stem, well, you could probably get a similar hand placement position by rolling your bars back, which often gets you in a better position for more technical downhill sections. So yeah, if you're really sensitive to change, yes, you'll notice a difference. If you're really used to your bike and you've ridden it as it is for a long time, then yes, it can. I mean, I guess there's other factors, and I've spoken a lot about how 10mm you might not notice, but you can notice a difference. I would say more so maybe on a cross-country bike where you're fixed in a position for a long time, and you'll notice that subtle position change and your hands not rolling forward or not having to move them if they're in just the right spot. So yeah, it's a tricky one to sort of nail very succinctly. The other factor is that when you change how you are on the bike, you're also going to change how the bike rides dynamically. What do I mean? Well, what I mean is that as you move your body mass front and back of pretty much the centre of the bike, you're going to move your centre of gravity around that point. And if you're a really dynamic rider and you're up and riding, well, it might not be a factor, but if you're doing cross-country stuff where you're sat, it will be a factor, and you might notice those differences on bike. So yeah, try it, see if you like it, but if it's a new bike, just ride it for a little bit and see how it feels. But yeah, let us know. From MDDM26, good name. Can I use a SRAM GX derailleur bearing Jockey wheels on a SRAM NX derailleur? Also, what about a GX shifter on NX? Well, takeaway point, this one's a really easy one to say, is yes. Jockey wheels, as long as they're for the same speed of system, so if it's all 11, then you can. If it's all 12, you can. Do be mindful that there is an upper jockey wheel and a lower, and they're sometimes different orientations to make sure that the narrow wide is in the right orientation. Sounds confusing, but when you play with them, they've got a little U or a little L on them, so you'll work it out. And yeah, the same goes for shifting actually. So with the SRAM NX, GX and SX, and I think any of the other cable operated mountain bike 12-speed shifters and mechs, they can all intermix. I mean, with Shimano for a long time, lots of the 10 speed, even the road stuff, could interplay to a degree. With 11 speed, lots of it again can play. A couple of standouts is the new Q stuff isn't compatible with older 11 speed, so just be mindful. Yeah, going for a different range of shifter with a lower mech is kind of the inverse of what many bike brands do. A couple of bike brands do sort of try and trick you into thinking, at least in the shop, that you're getting a really jazzy bike by putting an exceptionally jazzy rear mech on there, and then maybe sort of undergrade the shifter. And that's fine, looks good, but actually the shifter is the brains of your shifting operation and the brains of the drivetrain, really. So that's where, if you've got better bearings and you might have multi-release options, that's where to spend the money. So yeah, back to your question. Yeah, Jockey wheels will offer some different performance because I think you've got bearings versus bushings. Bushings are sort of a bit more maintenance free, whereas bearings you might need to lube up. But with a shifter, yeah, well worth the upgrade. Great question here. I've converted a bike from 3x8 to 1x11, but now I'm thinking about chainline. Yeah. What is a good chainline, and in what gear should the chain be straight? Great question. I guess first we've got to define chainline, and it's a tricky one. It was easier with a triple because you just put it in the middle ring and it should be in the middle of the cassette at the back. And I guess if you're running 1x11 or 1x12 or 1x13s, but effectively we're looking for that same thing. We're looking for a virtual line from the center of the bottom bracket. We're drawing it back to the middle of the rear hub, and parallel to that, that's the chain line. So again, it's going from front to back, so from the bottom bracket to the rear hub, and we're looking it to be as straight as possible. With a 1x11 setup, or any of the 1x setups, we probably want that your main drive ring, sorry, to be in line with the middle of the rear cassette. And you can play with different spacings on the rings. To a degree, you can play with the axle lengths as well. Without knowing more details, it is quite tricky. So non-boost is sort of like a certain size. And then if you're kind of running boost, it's then a different width. So I think for non-boost, it was 47.5 to 50 mil of this nominal chain, this virtual chain line number. And then for boost, it's kind of like 51 to 53, but there are 55 mil chain lines out there. So to give you a specific number of like, you need this, it's really tricky. And yeah, effectively you want the chain to be as straight as it can be from being in the middle ring, being in the single ring up front, and then being in the middle of the cassette at the back, because then it gives you the full width to the top and the full width of that chain to the bottom. The chain can flex around a lot, but straighter is better. Yeah, just let us know. Be interesting to see what the bike's like. Great question here from, very fittingly actually, Mr. Grey Fox. He's asking, what special aspects should I consider when pressing a BB with an alloy body into a carbon frame? Good question. Well, yeah, take home is, yeah, preparation is really key. So prepping all those surfaces, making sure that they're clean, as in your bottom bracket in the frame is really clean. Make sure that it's fairly smooth as well. Like sometimes you might get like raised edges of excess resin, which you might be able to sand. The resin will look clear, by the way, versus sort of the carbon fibre, which will not look clear. Then it really depends. There's a couple of different sort of like guidances on how to do it. So Park recommend using their retaining compound, and they recommend that you use a primer to prime the carbon. Then you use this retaining compound on the metal cups, and then you can slide them in. Personally, from experience, I've used that technique. I think with what you're trying to get away from is just bare metal on bare carbon, and if you're chewing through bottom brackets relatively quickly, then potentially a grease could work. Be really careful. Some greases can be sensitive or can react with the resins in carbon, so it's a really tricky one, and it's not so kind of clean and fast. I think that's where Park's guidance is really good in terms of using this prep, which creates a surface layer so that if you're using grease or these retaining compounds, I would stay away from things like really strong adhesives. Superglue is a brand name, but hopefully it covers off lots of people. Or using things like Loctite. Again, that's a brand name, but these kind of thread preps, which can be really permanent and really sticky, which I know sounds mad because you want your bottom bracket not to move. but you want it not to move whilst it's in there and it's working, but you want it to move when you need to get it out, which is, I guess, one of the kind of fun things, should we say, about some of these press fit bottom brackets. What I would say is if you've got the right frame and you've got the right axle, you can get the aluminium cups that thread together in the center and they pull themselves in, and it means that they're really kind of wedged in nicely and you're relying less on just the interface fit between the metal cup and the carbon frame. You've also got this threaded tension in there as well. Just be very careful to use the appropriate tools and yeah, check the manufacturer's ratings. That's the manufacturer of the bottom bracket and your frame. So yeah, do your research and it should be smooth and easy. And now I've got a rad and gnarly question. As a juxtaposition. Great question here from AC1639. What are the most important things to do before riding a trail or jump line for the first time? I mean, to be fair, I think we should probably dial a friend and get Blake in, because he's done more jump lines than I've ever done and has successfully ridden them and landed them. Me, not so much. But from a tech perspective, I can definitely tell you what to do. If you want more advice on how to do jumps and the first things you should do when checking out a jump line or some rad, gnarly trails, GMBN's got loads of videos on how to do that, and that'll be Blake, Neil talking you through step by step how to do it. Bike side, I can totally help with, so let's dive in. So, do an M check on your bike. Check that everything that should be tight is tight. Check all the bolts that are holding important things on, like wheels, bottom brackets, seats, seat posts, handlebars especially, stems. Brakes are also useful. So check all of those bits are tight. I mean, do check your frame for cracks as well. Like if you're jumping on an XC hardtail or you're jumping on a, let's say, a super light, hyper light, Olympic level cross-country race bike, I know that those guys do, and girls do, wild, rad jumps for cross-country these days, but a lot of those bikes aren't necessarily yet designed for such big drops. And key, not necessarily designed for my first jump experience where you might case the landing. So make sure you're on the appropriate bike, make sure you do an M check, and make sure that you check out loads of videos on GMBN here and here about how to do your first jump line. Well, hopefully that helped. Don't forget that you can use the hashtag Ask GMBN Tech in any of the off-road channels to get your questions answered by us. And I say us because it's not just me. We've got a whole gamut of just amazing bike-brained people that we can call on for advice. So yeah, send the questions in, and yeah, I'm just going to enjoy working from home.